Hi everyone. So in the last video, we used Lagrangian mechanics to solve this problem involving a particle sliding down a smooth parabolic surface, and specifically we found how the normal contact force acting on the particle varies with the tangent angle theta as defined on the diagram that you see here. So in this video, we're going to solve the same problem but using a totally different method. I've copied out here the problem statement, which is almost identical to the problem last time, but you'll see I've highlighted the new bit, which says using centripetal force. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time reintroducing the problem. I'll assume either that you've seen my previous video or that you will now spend a couple of moments reading through the problem statement and familiarizing yourself with all the details. So how are we going to actually approach this? Well, I've already given you a bit of a hint in the problem statement by mentioning centripetal force. All right, I've talked about centripetal force even though the particle is not actually moving in a circle. And so that implies that what we need to do is to pretend that the particle is moving in a circle instantaneously. In other words, we're going to, at any particular instant, at any particular position that the particle has as it slides down, we're going to approximate the shape of the parabola with a circle at that particular point. So I've just added such a circle onto the diagram, as you can see, the idea being that when the particle is at this position here, when the tangent angle is theta, the parabola is reasonably well approximated locally by that red circle, which has a radius of capital R. This diagram is not to scale, by the way. It looks to me that if you wanted to have a better fit between the circle and the parabola, the circle should have a significantly bigger radius. However, it doesn't really matter that it's not to scale, and I just didn't want the diagram to get too big. All that really matters is that the circle exists, and there is a way to find out the radius of the circle, which by the way is called the osculating circle. So I've just also added the two forces which are acting on the particle at this particular point. You've got the weight mg acting straight down, and you've got the normal contact force N acting perpendicular to the parabola. N is the force that we're interested in. I'm also going to define the speed of the particle at this particular point. Let's say it's going here tangentially to the parabola with a speed of v at that instant. Now, because we're going to consider centripetal force, we're going to need to resolve the weight mg along the direction of the radius, which means we care about this angle here. This angle is in fact just the same as theta, the tangent angle. A nice way to see why that is note that this angle here is theta. Then you compare this dashed horizontal line here with this vertical weight line here. That's just a rotation of 90 degrees, right? You rotate the dashed line by 90 degrees to get to the weight. And similarly, you've got your tangent line here, this line here, which gets rotated around also by 90 degrees to become the radial line, because there is a circle theorem that says the angle between a tangent and a radius is 90 degrees. So you've rotated both of those angles, both of those lines, sorry, that form the angle theta by 90 degrees, and therefore after that rotation it's still the same angle between them of theta. So now we've defined everything that we need to define in order to be able to come up with a radial force equation. So essentially what we're going to do is find the net force pointing towards the center of that osculating circle and set that equal to the general expression for centripetal force, which is mv squared over r. So you have a component of the weight, acting along the radial line, which is mg cos theta, which is pointing towards the center of the circle. So let's start by writing mg cos theta. Then from that, I need to subtract n, because n is also acting along the radial line, but it's acting outwards along the radial line. And we're just going to equate that to mv squared over the radius. That then straightforwardly rearranges to give n. And so we've got two main things we need to do to solve this problem. We need to find v squared in terms of theta, and we need to find r in terms of theta. Fortunately for us, there exists this formula here for the radius of the osculating circle, more commonly known as just the radius of curvature, involving the first and second derivatives of the curve of interest. So essentially we just need to differentiate the equation of the parabola twice, which is a straightforward thing to do, and plug those expressions into the formula. But before I do that, I want to point out one thing about how dy by dx is related to theta. So I've just drawn a new diagram here, which is just a zoomed in version of sort of this portion of the original diagram. Now, the usefulness of this diagram is that you can make a right-angled triangle. So I'll add a side here, and we'll say that this length here of this little right-angled triangle is delta x, and this length here is delta y. Then it follows from simple trigonometry that tan theta is just delta y over delta x. Delta y and delta x are signed quantities, by the way, so theta, as drawn in this diagram, has a positive delta x but a negative delta y, and therefore tan theta and theta itself is going to be negative. The main point, though, is that the interpretation of delta y over delta x is that it's the gradient of the tangent line, this solid line here, but the gradient of the tangent line is the same as the gradient of the parabola itself at that point, and therefore tan theta is just equal to dy by dx. So armed with that knowledge, we can write down that dy by dx is equal to tan theta, which is also equal to minus x over a, which just follows from differentiating the equation of the parabola. And it's also worth noting that the second derivative dy by dx squared is just minus 1 over a from differentiating that. Again, this is a constant, which is a property of parabolas in general. So let's plug our first and second derivatives into the radius of curvature equation and see what happens. So r is going to be the modulus of 1 plus, instead of doing it in terms of x, I'm going to do it in terms of theta. So this dy by dx here I'm going to replace with tan theta, the logic being that ultimately what we're looking for is n in terms of theta. So things being in terms of theta is good. So the numerator is going to be 1 plus tan squared of theta, all to the power of 3/2. We're going to divide that by minus 1 over a, and then take the modulus of the whole thing. 1 plus tan squared is sec squared. We do sec squared to the power of 3/2, and we get sec cubed. Taking the modulus makes this minus sign disappear, and then you've got 1 over a, which is just a, and so this whole thing simplifies very nicely to a sec cubed of theta. So just to summarize, here are the key results so far. We've got this expression for n in terms of theta and v squared and r. We know tan theta is minus x over a, which is going to be helpful in a little bit. And we also have our simplified expression for the radius of curvature r in terms of theta. The next thing we need to do is figure out what v squared is in terms of theta. The fact that v squared is part of the kinetic energy equation, half mv squared, suggests that we might be able to do this using conservation of energy. I avoided using conservation of energy in the last video because I wanted to do it in a purely Lagrangian way. However, let's just use conservation of energy for this video. So initially, the energy of the particle is purely kinetic, half mu squared, provided that we take the zero level for gravitational potential energy to be at the top of the parabola. At the instant when the particle reaches this point here, when the tangent angle is theta, it's got both kinetic energy, this time it's half mv squared because it's got a different speed at v, and it has lost some gravitational potential energy. It's lost mg times however much height it's fallen through, but the height is just the y coordinate, and the y coordinate is given by the expression minus x squared over 2a. So I'm going to do it in terms of x. I'm going to write it as minus mg x squared over 2a. Let's cancel down the factors of half and the factors of m as well, and rearrange to get v squared on its own. So v squared is just u squared plus g x squared divided by a. And the reason I wanted to do this in terms of x instead of in terms of y is because we have this relation between x and theta, so we can sub that in and get u squared plus g over a times a squared tan squared theta. Now we just need to combine everything together and do some trigonometric identity stuff. So n is mg cos theta minus this term here. We're going to plug in our expression for v squared and our expression for r. So we're going to have m over r was a sec cubed theta. So let's put a sec cubed theta there. Then I'm going to have my v squared expression in brackets. We've got u squared plus, also going to simplify this to just g a tan squared of theta. So if we expand the brackets and use the fact that sec is just 1 over cos, the second term is going to become minus mu squared over a times cos cubed theta, and the final term is just going to be minus mg. This a will cancel this a, and you're going to get tan squared theta cos cubed theta. So we can do something quite nice with this final term by noticing that this is the same as tan squared times cos squared times cos. Now tan times cos is sine, and so this whole thing ends up just being the same as sine squared theta times that extra factor of cos theta, because you've got a cubed here instead of a squared. And then we can combine the first term and the last term by factorizing. So we can do mg cos theta. The first term is going to contribute a 1, and the final term is going to contribute a minus sine squared theta. And then we've still got the middle term, which is now the last term, so minus mu squared over a cos cubed theta. Now we have another trig identity that says 1 minus sine squared is cos squared. So we take that and we multiply by yet another factor of cos, and we conclude that this whole thing that I just underlined is just cos cubed theta, and therefore we can do a lot of factorizing to arrive at a final simplified answer. So we're going to take out m cos cubed theta from both terms. I'm going to take out 1 over a as well. Then your first term is going to have a g and then an a, because originally it was just mg as the prefactor, and this needs to cancel with this. The second term is going to just be minus u squared. So we've got our result. This is totally consistent with the result we derived using Lagrangian mechanics and Lagrange multipliers for constraints. This method was obviously a lot quicker, but it is worth noting that this method sort of had more input into it, by which I mean this used the result for centripetal force being mv squared over r. This used the expression for radius of curvature, which we didn't derive, and also this used the fact that energy is conserved. None of these things we assumed in the last video. So it sort of makes sense that given all this extra input, this method would end up being quicker than the Lagrangian way. I usually like to spend lots of time talking about the physical interpretation and the meaning of the equations that we derive. However, I've done all of that in the previous video, and from this point on the discussion would be the same, so I won't repeat myself. And if you haven't watched the previous video, go and have a look at that to help understand the physical interpretation. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.